Imagine a painting so powerful, so controversial, that it sparked a religious crisis and changed the course of art history. Michelangelo's The Last Judgment isn't just a masterpiece, it's a visual shockwave that's still reverberating through time. This fresco doesn't just depict the end of the world, it forces us to confront the darkness within ourselves. At first glance, The Last Judgment might look like your typical religious scene. You've got Christ in the center, surrounded by saints and angels. Below, you see the dead rising from their graves, but look closer and you'll start to see that something's off. For one thing, this isn't the serene, gentle Jesus we're used to seeing. This Christ is muscular, beardless, and looking pretty angry. He's raised his right hand, not in blessing, but almost like he's about to bring it down in judgment. And those figures around him, they're not calm and orderly like in most paintings of heaven. No, these saints and angels look downright anxious. Some are huddling together, others are gesturing wildly. The bottom half of the painting is where Michelangelo really lets loose with the dark imagery. On the left, we see the dead rising from their graves. Some are helped by angels ascending to heaven. But on the right, oh boy, this is where things get grim. We see the damned being dragged down to hell by demons. And let me tell you, Michelangelo didn't pull any punches here. These scenes are violent, terrifying, and incredibly detailed. You can see the fear and anguish on the faces of the damned as they realize their fate. One particularly gruesome detail is the figure of Charon, the ferryman of the dead from Greek mythology. He's shown beating the damned souls with an oar to force them off his boat and into hell. It's a startling image, and it's right there on the altar wall of one of the most important chapels in Christendom. So, what's Michelangelo trying to tell us with all this? Well, the message is pretty clear. Sin has consequences, and they're not pretty. This isn't a comforting, "Don't worry, God loves you" kind of painting. This is a shape up or ship out warning. Michelangelo is reminding us that our actions have consequences. The good and the bad we do in life will be judged, and that judgment will be final and eternal. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? But it's not just about the afterlife. Michelangelo is also commenting on the darker aspects of human nature. The chaos and violence in the painting reflect the turmoil of his own time. Remember, this was painted during a period of great upheaval in the Church, with the Protestant Reformation in full swing. Now, as you might imagine, not everyone was thrilled with Michelangelo's vision. In fact, The Last Judgment caused quite a stir when it was unveiled in 1541. For one thing, there was all that nudity. Michelangelo painted almost all the figures nude, which was a big no-no in religious art at the time. The Pope's Master of Ceremonies, Biagio da Cesena, complained that it was disgraceful to have so many nude figures in a sacred place. He said it was more suited to a public bathhouse than a papal chapel. Michelangelo's response? He painted Biagio's face onto the figure of Minos, judge of the underworld, complete with donkey ears. But the complaints went beyond just the nudity. Some critics thought the whole thing was just too violent and frightening. They argued that a painting in a church should inspire hope and devotion, not terror. The controversy over The Last Judgment didn't end with its unveiling. In fact, it became a major issue during the Counter-Reformation, the Catholic Church's response to the Protestant Reformation. In 1563, the Council of Trent issued decrees about religious art. They said that art in churches should be free from lasciviousness and shouldn't depict anything profane or indecorous. Guess which painting was Exhibit A in this debate? Under pressure from these new guidelines, Pope ordered that the more offensive parts of The Last Judgment be covered up. It's worth noting that many of these modesty coverings were removed during restorations in the 20th century, but some remain. Now, let's take a step back and think about the artist himself. Michelangelo was in his 60s when he painted The Last Judgment. He'd already had a long and illustrious career, but he was also facing his own mortality. Some art historians see The Last Judgment as a reflection of Michelangelo's personal spiritual struggles. The chaos and tension in the painting might represent his own fears and doubts about salvation. There's a figure in the lower right of the painting that's particularly interesting. It's a man with flayed skin, usually identified as Saint Bartholomew. But the face on the skin is thought to be a self-portrait of Michelangelo. It's as if he's offering himself up for judgment, stripped bare before God. Despite all the controversy, or maybe because of it, The Last Judgment had a huge impact on the art world. It broke with so many traditions of religious painting that it sparked a real revolution in how artists approach sacred subjects. For one thing, Michelangelo's use of movement and emotion was groundbreaking. Earlier Last Judgment scenes tended to be static and orderly, with the saved neatly arranged on one side and the damned on the other. Michelangelo's version is all dynamic swirls and intense expressions. His approach to anatomy was also influential. The muscular, twisting figures in The Last Judgment became a model for generations of artists. You can see echoes of this style in the work of painters like Tintoretto and El Greco. To really understand The Last Judgment, we need to think about what was going on in the world when Michelangelo painted it. The early 16th century was a time of major upheaval in Europe. The Protestant Reformation had begun in 1517, challenging the authority of the Catholic Church. There were wars, both religious and political, raging across the continent. The very foundations of medieval society were being shaken. In Italy, things weren't much better. Rome had been sacked in 1527 by mutinous troops of the Holy Roman Emperor, an event that deeply shocked Michelangelo and his contemporaries. The idea that the Eternal City could fall seemed to signal that the world was coming to an end. In this context, The Last Judgment takes on an even darker significance. It's not just about individual sin and salvation. It's a vision of a world torn apart by conflict, where even the highest authorities, like the Church, might not be exempt from divine judgment. One of the most striking things about The Last Judgment is how it portrays the human condition. In Michelangelo's vision, we're all caught in a cosmic struggle between good and evil, heaven and hell. Look at the figures in the painting. Many of them seem to be in a state of tension, twisting and turning as if they're not sure which way they're going to go. It's like they're suspended between salvation and damnation, and their fate could go either way. This reflects a very Renaissance view of human nature. It's the idea that we have the potential for both great good and terrible evil within us. Our choices, our actions, determine which way we'll go. But there's also a sense of the smallness of human beings in the face of divine judgment. Even the largest figures in the painting are dwarfed by the sheer scale of the event. It's a humbling reminder of our place in the grand scheme of things. Another important theme in The Last Judgment is the idea of free will. This was a hot topic in Michelangelo's time, with the Protestant Reformation challenging traditional Catholic views on salvation and predestination. In the painting, we see the consequences of human choices played out on a cosmic scale. The saved and the damned are where they are because of their own actions. There's no sense of arbitrary judgment here. Everyone is reaping what they've sown. This emphasis on free will and personal responsibility adds to the painting's unsettling quality. It's saying, look, this could be you. Your choices matter. One of the fascinating aspects of The Last Judgment is how Michelangelo blends Christian and classical imagery. Remember, this was the Renaissance, when artists and scholars were rediscovering the art and literature of ancient Greece and Rome. We've already mentioned Charon, the ferryman from Greek mythology. But there are other classical elements too. Christ himself looks more like Apollo or Jupiter than traditional depictions of Jesus. The muscular, twisting figures recall classical sculptures. This mixing of Christian and pagan elements wasn't unique to Michelangelo, but he takes it to a whole new level in The Last Judgment. It adds to the painting's complexity and, for some viewers, its unsettling quality. It's as if Michelangelo is saying that this final judgment applies to all of human culture and history, not just the Christian tradition. So, what's the legacy of this controversial masterpiece? Well, for one thing, it changed religious art forever. After The Last Judgment, it was hard to go back to simple, serene depictions of religious scenes. Artists had to grapple with the emotional and psychological depth that Michelangelo had brought to the subject, but its impact goes beyond just art history. The Last Judgment continues to provoke debate and discussion to this day. It raises big questions about morality, free will, and the nature of good and evil. It challenges us to think about our own lives and choices. In a way, the painting is doing exactly what Michelangelo intended. It's not letting us off the hook. It's forcing us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our world. Sure, it's not the most comforting piece of art you'll ever see, but maybe that's the point. Sometimes, we need art that challenges us, that makes us uncomfortable, that forces us to think. Next time you're lucky enough to visit the Sistine Chapel, take a good long look at The Last Judgment. Look past the beauty and the spectacle and try to see the deeper message. You might just find yourself face to face with some of life's biggest questions. If you enjoyed uncovering the secrets of art history, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos that peel back the layers of famous artworks.